Good morning, friends. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for those who are joining us online. I'll start with a reading from these beautiful prayer demands of Yogananda's. When he was about to pass, he wrote a letter basically letting people know how to stay in tune, how to stay connected after his passing. And he said, I will speak to you through my whispers from eternity. So as I read this, feel that Yogananda is not just speaking to us through this prayer, but also showing us how to pray, what to look for. This is the demand that through all tests and trials, the love of God may never fade. O Spirit, I care not if all sufferings come to me, or all things be taken away from me. I pray only that my love for Thee never fade through my own negligence. May my love for Thee burn brightly forever on the altar of my constant remembrance. It's so short and so beautiful, I'm going to read it again. O Spirit, I care not if all sufferings come to me, or all things be taken away from me. I pray only that my love for Thee never fade through my own negligence. May my love for Thee burn brightly forever on the altar of my constant remembrance. So, this week, as described in the Bible, certainly has to be one of the most dramatic weeks in history. It has been repeated, the story of this time has been repeated now for more than 2,000 years. With great power, it is a life-changing week, not only for Jesus and for his disciples, but for everybody, because Jesus came not for himself, nor did he come for just a small group of disciples or just for one religion. He came in order to bring the light of God to the whole world. And so his suffering wasn't really suffering in the same way that we think of suffering. I know that when I was growing up, my church kind of had the image, I was Episcopalian, for those of you who might be curious, had the image of Christ on the cross, and there was a kind of an emphasis on how much he suffered for us. He didn't really suffer in the body the way that you and I suffer in the body, because he had control over his prana. Suffering doesn't take place in the body, it takes place in the mind. And if we have control over the potential of our mind, the potential of our thoughts, then we don't suffer. Yogananda one time was with a group of disciples, and they were installing a big, heavy concrete well, and they were moving it, and it slipped and fell and crushed his foot. And he said, now I'm going to demonstrate something to you. Now, his foot was really crushed. It wasn't just he was pretending. His foot was crushed, but he said, now I'm going to demonstrate something to you. I'm going to allow those nerve endings and my mind to feel the pain. And when he did that, he couldn't even put any weight whatsoever on it. Now he said, I'm going to withdraw that and control my thoughts, and he could walk back and forth perfectly well. And he did that 2 or 3 times to demonstrate not his power, but the potential of power of control over those outward sensations. And so Christ in this manner not only could control the pain and suffering that most of us have, but as he said, he could have called down a legion of angels and avoided the whole thing. But here he is on Palm Sunday. Jerusalem is on a hill, and there's another hill on the other side, and a big valley in between. And so he's coming down the slope of the valley before it goes up into Jerusalem, and crowds have gathered, and they're singing, Hosanna, the King has come, and they're laying down palm fronds. And so Jesus, just as he a week later is going to be relatively untouched by the pain, he's relatively untouched by all this wonderful acclaim because he's completely settled in his self. Now the disciples, on the other hand, they're more like you and me. They don't yet have the control or the centeredness that will come. One time, Swami Kriyananda portrayed, there was a Christmas pageant, and he portrayed, because Swami had a beard, this was in 1949, 1950, I'm not sure exactly, but in that time period, not many men in America had beards. Master had told Swami to wear a beard, and so Swami had a beard, so they asked him to come and portray Christ in this Christmas pageant. And after the pageant had finished, Swami came back, and Master said, well, how did it go? And I heard that people really felt that you looked like Jesus. And Swami said, well, I would rather be like Jesus than look like Jesus. And Master didn't chuckle. He just said quite seriously, that will come. And so for all of us, that will come. We'll be that Christ. We'll be that consciousness that is unified with God. But in the meantime, just as Jesus had this journey down the hill and a journey back up the hill, we have a journey that isn't one in geographical distance, it's one in consciousness. But it's one that the disciples, they were disciples and they were great saints in all of them. Even Judas was a great saint from past lives, but they were not yet completely realized the way Jesus was. Otherwise, if they were, they would be a Christ. Christ isn't Jesus' last name. It's a title given to someone who has that consciousness. The original title that Master was going to use for Autobiography of a Yogi was the Christ, Yogi Christ of India. And so showing that when you achieve that level of consciousness, then you too become one with God, and you too are a son of God. Until you achieve that, then you're a son of man, because you think of the body and the personality as your reality. So that journey of consciousness Christ had already made. He was making a different kind of a journey, a drama for all of us, for our sake. And so the dramatic week of coming down in the crowds, proclaiming, singing Hosanna, and laying down palm fronds, and then a few days later, the Last Supper, at which he breaks the bread and offers the wine, which has become the central sacrament of Christianity. And then right after that, he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane, which is in that valley between these two hills. He's arrested. Miracles happen during that time. He's taken immediately and condemned and beaten and then crucified, all within 5 days. Imagine that. That's a very, very dramatic time period. Well, Jesus maintained his ability to stay, to have equanimity throughout that. But for the disciples, it was a very, very difficult week. So there are many, many ways that you can interpret Scripture, look at Scripture. But in part, what I'm focusing on today is that difference of consciousness between the disciple and the master. between those seeking self-realization and those who have achieved it. In Patanjali, it says, yogas chitta vritti nirod. Yoga, union with God, the Christ consciousness, comes automatically when we are able to neutralize the likes and dislikes, the desires. And so Christ was beyond having personal desires. He didn't want to do that suffering. In the Garden of Gethsemane, remember, he prayed, Lord, let this cup pass from me, if it be thy will. But nevertheless, let thy will be done. That is a great teaching for all of us, because in our consciousness, we have these pluses and minuses. We haven't neutralized those likes and dislikes yet. How do we make that journey to neutralize? The best way that we can do at this stage of our development, of our consciousness, is to align our will with the will of God. Master said his highest prayer was, I will reason, I will, I will act. But guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right path in everything. And so that's our journey at this point, to offer ourselves into the light of God, yes, of course, but into the guidance of God, because it's our, stubbornness, our desire to be in charge, to have that separation of ego. It's our desire to hold on to that it prevents us from offering ourselves into the will of God. But it would be a very good practice for all of us every day as we leave our meditation, and I certainly do this. It's one of my core practices. I pray for the world, but I end my meditation by offering myself completely, to the best of my ability, into the will of God for that day, into the desire for attunement. And then I go forth and do whatever the duties of the day ask for. But for all of us, that's the journey from the disciple to the master, is to offer ourselves into the will of God until that becomes so deep and so complete that the will of God is the only thing expressing through us, as it was the only thing expressing through Christ. And then just let go of all the rest. The Son of Man, the Son of God, the likes, the dislikes, let go of all of them. Just rest peacefully in your desire to do the will of God and to do it to the best of your ability. If you do that, all the rest, all the details will take care of themselves. God bless you.
Since we don't come very often here, we will both speak today, share. There's so much one could say about Jyotish. Did a beautiful job and shared so much, such wonderful deep thoughts, but a couple of things I would like to add. First, the choir did such a magnificent job with Hosanna at the beginning, and I'm so glad you did, because I wanted to share a few words about that Swami Kriyananda, who wrote that song, that he said, so few people will really hear the undertones of that song because it seems joyful and people are clapping, but underneath it there's the undertone of change and pain. And the more he said that, he describes the song in that way. And when you listen to it with that awareness, you can hear that yes, there was celebration, but this world is never what it seems. Even the best of times, the worst of times, it's never really what it seems, because there's a consciousness behind it all. And so in that song, there's the music. Swami was trying to convey the bittersweet quality of life. Even when things seem like they're going so well, always be a little bit aware that there's the opposite thing. The opposite side of the coin is right there. Swami gave an example once. He was going on, Ananda had a big forest fire in 1975, many years ago, 76, excuse me. And afterwards, what was Swami's response? Let's go on a national tour, just to put out positive energy. So we were able to buy a motorhome, and he just loved this little motorhome. And he had a group of singers that went with him, and they were driving many, many cities from West Coast to East Coast and back. Lasted several months, and he reached many people, and people came and moved to the community, even though we were in a total rebuilding phase. But one of the first days they were riding in it, and Swami was so happy in the new motorhome. Somebody the driver, they parked in a parking lot to take a break, and the driver hadn't quite fully stopped yet, and Swami didn't realize it. So he reached up to get something from one of the cabinets on an upper level, and then the motorhome jolted, and he fell back and he jammed his finger. And he just said, I just started laughing, because it was Divine Mother's, just the duality, the joy of this wonderful new motorhome, and then the pain of his little finger getting dislocated. And so that's what he was trying to convey in that song. Not to go around saying, oh, be a, dour, and it may seem good now, but you just wait, But just to stay centered in yourself. Whatever happens, enjoy the moment, or recognize the suffering, recognize the pain. But you need to understand it's just waves on the ocean. They come and they go. The suffering comes, the joy comes. But the only thing that's eternal is God's light, and that's underneath it all. And then, so there they are, coming down into Jerusalem. And it's very, and then Christ gives the dichotomy, because mostly throughout the Bible, as it's been brought down to us over the thousands of years, he refers to himself as the Son of God. And here, he refers to himself as the Son of Man. And he says, the Son of Man shall be lifted up. Probably no one even paid attention to it at the time. But then later it was interpreted, the Son of Man will be lifted up, meaning he would be, and Swami, if you caught the way he wrote it, he said, as it's been interpreted, meaning that he was prophesying his crucifixion. I don't think that's what he was really saying when he said the Son of Man will be lifted up. He was saying, human consciousness will be raised. It wasn't about the crucifixion, although that was part of it, of course. But it's a wonderful, he was showing us, yes, I have lived with you. I have, saying to the disciples and to all of us, because we're all disciples of Christ. He's one of our line of gurus. And he was saying, yes, I've lived among you. I've laughed with you. I've walked with you. I've eaten with you. I've traveled with you. And so on a certain level, I have a human body, and it's expressed outwardly. But that's going to be lifted up. And your consciousness that you are the Son of Man, that you and I are only that. We're only the ego. We're only the body or personality. That will be lifted up by our attunement with the Son of God, by our attunement with the Christ consciousness. Master off and often, the Christ consciousness. In India, it's Kutastha Chaitanya. It means the same thing. The totally awakened awareness at the spiritual eye. And then it's interesting to think, Master gave the world so much. And one of the great gifts, which I think will be more and more understood, recognized, and appreciated over time, was his interpretation of the Bhagavad Gita, which is the story of the battle of light and darkness. But what he's talking about, the way he interpreted it uniquely, we have shared his interpretation to students in India who grew up with the Bhagavad Gita, and they were just overwhelmed. They said, we have read this since childhood, but the way Yogananda interprets it, it's a whole new meaning. And the way he does it is, there are forces of darkness. It's a war. Forces of darkness and forces of light, but they're not. They were historical figures, but Master's interpretation, they are parts of our own self, our higher qualities and our lower qualities, and they're at war. And the battle of the Bhagavad Gita is the battle we all fight, in a sense, between our internal Son of Man and our internal Son of God. And so Christ is, and think about it, because those who threw down the palm leaves and were, blessed be who comes in the name of the Lord, those, not knowing who exactly they were, but they weren't necessarily the ones who betrayed him. Some of them remained faithful to the end. His disciples, even though they may have hidden and denied him a little bit, they were faithful. But then there were the Pharisees, the priests of the temple, who were threatened by this Son of God, who were threatened by his spiritual power because it transcended everything they offered. And so the humble disciples, those who were following him, those who saw that he was the Son of God, and the proud, power-infused priests of the temple, those are both parts of ourself. Those parts of us that say, I don't really need to meditate. I'm pretty good the way I am. Or who are these spiritual people? I mean, they're nice enough, but I don't know. I have my doubts about them. It's all that's part of ourself, the part that doubts, the part that tries to demean our own innate spirituality. So we've got Pharisees in our own consciousness, and we have humble disciples in our own consciousness. And the whole spiritual journey is to say, I identify with the humble disciples, and Pharisees, get thee behind me. And in that beautiful passage from the Bhagavad Gita that Swamiji quoted, it's from chapter 11, one of the most magnificent chapters in the Gita, where Arjuna, who was in that lifetime was our guru, was Yogananda, and Krishna, Babaji Krishna, and they're cousins and they're friends, and Krishna is his charioteer, Son of Man, Son of God, both in that one being. But Arjuna asks him, please, Krishna, just let me see your real nature. I see you as the Son of Man. I see you as my cousin, my friend, who's helping me to fight this battle. But let me see you as the Son of God. Let me see you who you really are. And then he has a vision of the cosmic nature. He sees him as the Son of God. And it goes bigger and bigger and more beautiful and poetic. And then finally Arjuna says, in paraphrasing, that's enough. That's all I can take for now. And then Krishna comes back to being the Son of Man. And so that's the whole journey, to accept that dichotomy resides within us, and to say, no, I will not identify with the Pharisees and the doubters within me, but I will identify with the highest aspect of me, the most humblest aspect of me. And in that, I will both see the Son of God and be the Son of God. That's our journey, and that's our destiny. God bless you.
Quiet. It's a work in progress. Still your mind if you want to pray. Send all cares far away. Sing so